My name is Rowena Vale, 40 years old. The house smelled like cinnamon and pine, the kind of Christmas scent that pretends nothing ugly can live inside it. I'd strung the lights myself that morning, a lattice of warm gold across the bookshelves and the window, a promise to myself that I could hold a room steady even if the people in it weren't. Guests drifted between music and chatter. My mother did her orbit of hostess smiles. My father sat as if the chair were a throne he tolerated. My brother Gregory stood near the kitchen doorway, studying his phone like it might evolve into a better life if he stared hard enough. I waited until the song ended and the laughter thinned. I set the envelope on the table between my parents, the white of it sharp against the red runner. "This is for you," I said. Calm. Accountant voice. My hands were steady. 10 years of practice in making numbers behave. My father peered in the envelope as if it were a trick. He slid a knuckle under the flap and pulled out the check. My mother leaned in, the pearl on her earlobe glinting like a snowflake that never melts. 5,000, she read softly, the softness already curdling. "To help with the car and the utilities," I added, "just to get you clear." Across the room, someone laughed at a joke and clinked a glass. The gaiety made the silence at our table louder. Dad's smile was a slice of light that had lost its warmth. He put the check back in the envelope and placed it on the table as if returning a dish he hadn't ordered. Then he leaned toward me, breath faintly sweet with the punch. "You know, Rowena," he said, voice easy, conversational, scalpel clean. "The best gift would be the day you're gone." Time stopped, or maybe it doubled down and pressed its weight onto my chest. I felt my face grow hot, then cold, then nothing. I looked to my mother, pleading for a crack in the scene, a laugh, a Walter, some lifeline. She nodded, slow. "Your brother has always made us proud," she said, arranging the silver forks by ascending height, a little habit she had when she needed order. "You complicate things." Gregory kept his eyes on his phone. His thumb moved, slow circles, no text, just a motion like a prayer to be somewhere else. I could feel each year of the last decade like a bead I'd threaded and kept counting. Mortgage payments, emergency repairs, winter gas bills, grocery runs. I swallowed. "Okay," I said, "because that's what you say when your life tips and the room is watching." My chair legs rasped the floor. "I need a minute." Outside, the Montana night wrapped me in a cold so clean it hummed. The porch boards were slick with frost. Christmas lights across the street blinked in a staggered rhythm, like a heart trying to steady itself. I pressed my palms to the railing. In my head, numbers arranged themselves obediently. The 10 years, the amounts, the dates. It should have made me feel in control. It didn't. Through the window, I could see my mother tilting her head toward my father, murmuring something with that tight mouth that made compliments sound like warnings. My father shrugged, a fractional lift that said, "Don't make a scene." Gregory finally looked up, toward the door I'd just slipped through. For a second, our eyes met through the glass. He looked away first. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket, the haptic tremor like a small animal. A text from Pamela. "How's the party? Surviving?" I typed and erased, typed and erased. What was there to say? That my father had gifted me with vanishing? That my mother had co-signed the wish without even signing her name? Behind me, the door opened a crack, and a neighbor's teenage daughter, bright with sugar, asked if I wanted cocoa. I smiled and lied, and she bounced back to the warmth I couldn't feel. I thought of Ellen then, my sister, gone 10 years, leaving me her voice in paper. The wooden box she'd given me sat under the tree inside, carved vines along the lid. I'd moved that box from apartment to apartment, house to house, like a relic from a simpler faith. On its underside, in pencil, a private rule I'd written at 25. Don't open when angry. The lid had a fine hairline in the varnish now, a small flaw that made me love it more. I pictured it in the halo of the tree lights, patient the way thin objects can be patient. "Never measured up," my father had said once, when he thought I'd left the room. The phrase came back now, like a recurring invoice. The porch light flickered. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked twice and then decided against it. I breathed in until the air hurt, then let it burn its way out. The door opened again. My mother's face found the gap first, courteous as a hotel. "You're letting the heat out," she said without accusation and with all of it. Her gaze registered my empty hands, the empty space beside me. Don't be dramatic, Rowena. Your father was only... Honest, I supplied. She blinked. There was a small, startled animal inside her then, but it hid before I could be sure. Don't start, she said lightly. It's Christmas. Gregory appeared behind her. Hey, he said, not quite meeting my eyes, not quite avoiding them. Maybe come in? People are asking where you went. I'm here, I said. That's where I went. He had the decency to look confused. In the living room, the tree threw patterned light onto the ceiling like river water. I crossed to it and crouched beside Ellen's box. My hand hovered over the lid. In the ornament reflection, my face looked like someone else's, older and younger at once. I traced the carved vine, felt the familiar notch near the hinge. Don't open when angry. I wasn't sure what I was now, angry or empty. My hand fell. My father had returned to his chair, sovereign of the easy comments that function like executions. He was laughing at something a neighbor said, as if there were no corpse of a sentence cooling on the table between us. I walked past him to the hall. The bathroom mirror was merciless, fluorescent, honest in a way that scraped. I washed my hands to the wrists as if I could rinse the last 10 years off my skin. Pamela texted again. Your silence is saying things. Call me if you need a lifeboat. I typed, after. Then, without quite deciding to, I opened the contacts app and scrolled to Victor Lane. The name looked like a threshold. My thumb hovered. When I came out, the party had found itself another topic. My mother approached with a plate of almond cookies, a white flag shaped like crescents. Eat, she said, her voice sweetened with effort. You've always been so sensitive. Careful, I said gently. You almost said generous. Her smile held. No one is questioning your contributions, she said, picking a neutral noun like a neutral paint color. But Gregory... Made you proud, I finished. I heard. I wasn't loud. It still felt like shouting. Gregory took a step closer, cheeks pink, not from drink. Can we not do this? He asked quietly. For the first time that night, he looked right at me. There was something like pleading in it, but it wasn't for me. It was for the world to stay arranged around his comfort. Sure, I said. We can do this later. My father snorted softly, a sound he used when he wanted to tell you your feelings were an expensive hobby. Don't drag your dramatics into tomorrow, Ro, he said. Some of us have real problems. It was such a tidy sentence, I almost admired it. He had said it with the casualness that lets the knife slip between ribs without mess. In the kitchen, I set the plate down, took out my phone, and this time I didn't hover. I typed, Victor, I might need to discuss the deed. Call me Monday. I hit send. The message left like a bird released through an open window. Back in the living room, I lifted the envelope with the check and tucked it back into my bag. My mother's mouth opened. I held her gaze. It's wasteful, I said, and heard how calm I sounded, to give something no one wants. Her eyes flashed something. Shame, fear, and then smoothed. We didn't say that, she said. You didn't have to, I said. You were very clear. The clock on the mantel chimed 9, plain and unembellished. I slipped on my coat. People said their goodbyes around me without knowing a single thing had ended. At the door I looked back. The tree lights blinked their patient river. Ellen's box waited beneath, closed, obedient to an old rule. My father was telling a story about Greg's business and the new contract that was practically in the bag. Gregory nodded along, a man on a sinking ship praising the view. On the porch, the cold felt like truth. I stood in it and let it tell me what it needed to. The words formed in me with the same neatness as an equation balancing. If they want me gone, I will go. But not as a ghost. I will go with a signature and a stamp and a ticket and a door that opens because I turn the key. I took out my phone again, wrote a second text to Victor. Also need to review any old co-signed loans, transfers, anything that looks odd, and hit send. Then I typed one more message to Pamela. Hold me to this. Tomorrow I start choosing me. The night held its breath. I let out mine. Somewhere inside, the wooden box gleamed in the tree's glow. I didn't open it. Not yet. Some doors, even the right ones, you open when your hand is steady. I stepped off the porch and listened to the snow complain under my boots. Every footprint a small, signed decision. The Montana morning cracked open gray and silent, the kind of cold that made the sky look brittle. My phone alarm buzzed at 6 o'clock a.m., And for once, I didn't hit snooze. I sat up, the air sharp against my face, and the resolve from last night rose again, steady, unshakable. I made coffee strong enough to burn, sat at the kitchen table with a notepad, and began writing a list. 10 years of my parents' expenses lined up in columns: mortgage, insurance, groceries, repairs, utilities. A decade of sacrifice turned into neat ink rows. I wanted to see what I'd really given, to turn invisible devotion into visible math. When I totaled it up, the number sat on the page like a verdict: $186,400. I traced it with my finger. That was the price of their approval, except I'd never actually owned it. I called Pamela Gray, my best friend since college. She answered on the second ring, still half asleep, voice gravelly. "Morning, Ro. You sound too awake for a Saturday." "I made a decision," I said. "Oh, no," she groaned softly. "The kind that involves champagne or lawyers?" "Lawyers," I replied, exhaling. "Both, maybe." Her tone sharpened. "Talk to me." I told her everything. The Christmas insult, my father's words, my mother's nod. The way Gregory's silence hurt even more. When I finished, Pamela didn't rush to fill the quiet. She just breathed with me, through the phone, until I heard her whisper, "You've given them everything. Now it's time to take your life back." That line, "take your life back," landed like a starting gun. After we hung up, I dialed Victor Lane, my attorney and old family acquaintance. He answered briskly, like always. "Rowena, what can I do for you?" "I need to confirm something," I said. "The house, the deed's in my name, right?" A pause as he clicked through records. "Yes, you've been the sole payer for 10 years. They never refinanced." "So they have no claim?" "None," Victor said. "You own it outright, or you will once the balance is cleared." The sound of those words filled the room like oxygen. "I want to pay off the mortgage today," I told him. "That's a big move. You sure?" "I'm done buying forgiveness," I said quietly. "It's time I buy freedom." He hesitated, then said, "I'll draw up the paperwork. I can also prepare a formal notice to vacate. Legal, respectful, airtight." "Do it," I said. 14 days. Next, I called Irene Watson at the local bank. She'd helped me set up the payment plans years ago. "Rowena, I haven't heard from you in months." "Irene, I want to close out the Vail mortgage. Full payment." There was a small gasp on the other end. "You're sure? That's just under $50,000. "I'm sure." "All right, I'll process it this morning. It'll post by noon." As I waited, I opened my email and searched flights, Paris. The idea had been a whisper for years, a someday dream Ellen used to talk about before she got sick. Now it glowed on the screen like a dare. A one-way flight in 3 days. Affordable. I booked it. By noon, Irene confirmed the payoff was complete. I stared at the confirmation screen, my pulse steady. Every digit felt like a chain snapping loose. Then I sat down with the blank page and began to write the letter. "Walter and Joyce, for 10 years, I've carried the weight of this house and every debt that came with it. You've made it clear I was never the pride you wanted. So now I'm giving you what you asked for. Space. Effective immediately. You have 14 days to vacate the property. It's legally mine, and I intend to reclaim it. This isn't revenge, it's closure. I wish you peace, but I'm done paying for it. Rowena." My handwriting wavered once near the end, but the rest stayed firm. I folded the letter, slipped it into an envelope, and walked into the living room. The Christmas tree still stood in the corner, lights unblinking now, like they'd lost the energy to pretend. Beneath it sat the old wooden box Ellen had carved with vines along the lid. I knelt and slid the envelope underneath it. For a long moment, I just stared. The box felt heavier now, as if it knew it was hiding more than one secret. I brushed my fingers across the lid, and that's when I felt it. A small bump under the wood grain. I lifted the box slightly, and something slid inside, a sound like metal tapping. I opened it. Inside, Ellen's journal lay where it always did. But this time, I noticed a tiny brass key taped to the inside cover. My breath caught. It wasn't there before, or maybe I'd never noticed it. On the page beneath, in Ellen's careful handwriting, "When they call you a burden, choose the door only you can open." I sat still, her words settling into me. Was the key a metaphor or real? The back of the journal listed dates, amounts, and cryptic notes. Transfer held. Check redirected. At the top, Greg/mom/shared line. My phone buzzed. A message from Victor. Paperwork ready. Mortgage cleared. I'll deliver the 14-day notice this afternoon. Also, I saw something odd in their old loan statements. Some recurring transfers. Probably nothing, but I'll review. Probably nothing. I'd learned that phrase usually meant everything. By late afternoon, the last box of my belongings was taped shut. My flight to Paris was confirmed for Wednesday. I stood in the center of the living room, the house suddenly foreign, like it had already moved on without me. Outside, a car horn beeped. Jamal, the rideshare driver, had arrived. I took one last look at the tree and the wooden box. For a second, I thought about taking it with me. Then I didn't. Some things had to stay behind to haunt the right people. Jamal smiled as I got into the back seat, suitcase beside me. Airport? Yes, I said. Big trip? I looked out the window at the house. My house. One final time. Something like that. As we pulled away, I caught the faint reflection of the tree in the window. A flicker of gold, then gone. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about who needed me, only where I was going. Paris was waiting, and somewhere in Ellen's journal, a secret had just started whispering. Paris didn't feel like freedom right away. It felt like air too light to breathe. The cab from Charles de Gaulle moved through a city glowing with rain, headlights sliding over cobblestones like spilled mercury. I pressed my forehead to the glass, watching gray buildings shimmer past, balconies with black railings, laundry fluttering in defiance of drizzle. Everything looked permanent and new at once. When the driver dropped me at a small hotel in Montparnasse, I stood on the sidewalk a moment too long, suitcase handle clenched in my hand. No one here knew the sound of my father's voice when he said I was a burden. No one here would look at me like a utility bill that forgot to pay itself. I could vanish and be nobody. That thought was terrifying and beautiful. My first morning, I found a cafe across from the hotel, marble tables, croissants lined like soldiers. The barista's English was hesitant, my French worse, but we managed. Café crème? She asked. Yes, I said. She smiled, handed me a cup that smelled like courage. I sat by the window and opened Ellen's journal again. The brass key, taped to the inside cover, glinted in the light. I turned the page. There were notes I'd missed before, scribbles in pencil. April 12th. Mom said Greg fixed the overdraft again? Can't be right. August. Walter swore I misunderstood the account name, but the transfers... Each line tightened my stomach. Ellen had seen something, maybe years before I did. And the key? What door had she meant? The cafe door opened, letting in a rush of cold and the sound of traffic. A man with paint on his hands walked in, ordered in rapid French, then caught me staring at his stained fingers. He smiled. First day? I nodded. Is it that obvious? You look like you're listening for instructions, he said, switching to English with a soft accent. I'm Pierre. He turned out to be an art instructor who rented a small studio nearby. When I told him I used to paint before life got complicated, he said, then you need to remember how to complicate life differently. Come tomorrow, 11. I almost refused, but something about his tone, direct, unhurried, reminded me of the person I used to be. So the next day I went. His studio was 3 floors up, paint-thick air, soft jazz bleeding from an old speaker. No rules here, Pierre said, handing me a brush. Only breath. The first stroke felt like apology. The second felt like permission. By the time the canvas held something resembling light, I realized I hadn't thought of my parents for an hour. That was a kind of miracle. After class, Pierre pointed toward the Seine. Walk until your feet hurt. That's when you'll see the city properly. I did. Bridges arched over the river like ribs. Street musicians played violins with faces that had known hunger and laughter at the same time. I found a bench and wrote in my notebook, "Freedom isn't peace yet. It's noise without blame." For the first time, I let myself read the messages on my phone. There were 5 missed calls, all from home. I hesitated, thumb hovering, then listened. My father's voice, shaky. "Rowena, we're at Greg's. It's not good. Call us." Then my mother, her tone wrapped in tissue paper. "Please, we need to talk. He can't help us. You were always the steady one." Another message, shorter. "Please, baby, we're sorry." The word sorry cracked something small inside me, not because I believed it, but because it had taken a collapse to summon it. I deleted none of them. I let them sit there, quiet proof of how quickly pride evaporates when comfort does. That night I couldn't sleep. I dreamed of Ellen again, sitting at my old kitchen table, drawing vines like the ones carved on her wooden box. Only this time, her pen traced numbers instead of stems, looping digits that looked like bank routing codes. I woke with the shape of them burned behind my eyelids. The next morning, I walked along the Seine again, cold wind slapping color into my cheeks. Pamela's name flashed on my screen. I answered. "Tell me you're eating," she said by way of greeting. "Croissants count?" "They count if you're happy." "I think I'm getting there," I said. "But, Pamela, do you remember any of Mom's old accounts? Or Gregory's business?" She hesitated. "Why?" "Ellen's journal has notes, transfers, mismatched dates." "Rowena," she said carefully. "When I was helping you pack, I found a box in your storage unit, a small blue one. It had your name on it, 4R. Want me to open it?" I froze mid-step. "Not yet. Just keep it safe, please." "Okay, but I peeked. There's paperwork, old bank slips. Maybe you should see them." My pulse ticked faster. "Send me photos. Tomorrow." "Sure," she said. "And Row?" "Yeah?" "I hope Paris makes you brave enough to stop looking backward." "Me too," I said, but the words tasted uncertain. That evening, in class, Pierre studied my half-finished painting, streaks of blue and gray colliding like weather. "You're painting something you left," he said quietly. "Maybe," I admitted. He smiled. "Then keep painting until you can't see it anymore." I did, stroke after stroke until the blue swallowed the gray, until the canvas stopped looking like Montana and started looking like sky. When I left the studio, Paris had shifted again. The rain had stopped. The city was gold. I walked the bridge back to my hotel, the brass key warm in my pocket like it had absorbed my heartbeat. Later, when I lay in bed, Pamela's text arrived with 3 photos. The first, a bank slip with my mother's handwriting. The second, a transfer from R. Vale Account 3 to G. Vale Enterprises, LLC. The memo line read, "Temporary float." The third, Ellen's signature on a witness line. The air left my lungs. Ellen hadn't been paranoid. She'd been trying to warn me. I sat up, the brass key in my hand. For a second, I thought I felt it pulse, faint but real, like it wanted me to follow. Somewhere across the ocean, my parents' apologies waited, but the truth Ellen buried was louder than forgiveness. The photos Pamela sent glowed on my phone screen long after midnight. Each image felt like a missing puzzle piece that Ellen had tried to hand me from beyond time. Her looping handwriting, careful but rushed, sat beside numbers that shouldn't exist. Transfers from my account, amounts I didn't remember authorizing, a signature that looked almost like mine but wasn't. I stared until the digits blurred. Then I read Ellen's last line again. "When they call you a burden, choose the door only you can open." That sentence kept echoing in my head as I took the brass key from my bag. It was small and plain, nothing ornate, just a key that had waited patiently for its door. I didn't know what it opened, but I could feel the gravity of it, like holding a secret you hadn't earned yet. Morning came pale and blue. I skipped the cafe and went straight to the bank near Rue de Rennes, my coat unbuttoned against the chill. In the waiting area, the scent of metal and paper reminded me of every loan office I'd ever sat in, paying for someone else's comfort. A clerk called my name. "Mademoiselle Vale?" "Yes," I said, sliding Ellen's brass key across the counter. "I believe this belongs to a safe deposit box. I need to know if it's still active." He examined it, typed something, frowned slightly, and then nodded. "Yes, registered to E. Vale. You are listed as secondary access. We will need identification." I handed him my passport, pulse steady but loud. Minutes later, he led me down a corridor lined with steel doors. The sound of keys turning echoed like dominoes falling. My hand trembled as the clerk opened the box and left me alone. Inside lay a small envelope and a folded notarized letter. The letter was dated 11 years ago, 2 months before Ellen died. "If you're reading this, Ro, something happened that I couldn't fix. I found evidence that Mom and Greg have been redirecting your transfers, using your name to funnel money into his business. Dad knows, though he pretends not to. I confronted them once. It got bad. So I gathered copies of everything I could. They'll call you ungrateful when you stop paying. Don't let them shame you. There's more in the blue box at Pamela's. You'll know what to do." My throat tightened. I unfolded the second document, the notarized one. It was a formal statement of identity misuse signed by Ellen and witnessed by a notary in Billings. At the bottom, her handwriting again. Keep this safe. One day you'll need it to free yourself. I sat back, eyes burning. The room seemed smaller. All those years, they hadn't just drained my bank account. They'd used my name, my credit, my signature. My parents had let Gregory build his business with counterfeit bricks, and I'd been footing the invisible scaffolding. When I returned to the surface, the city outside looked brighter, crueler. I texted Pamela. The key opened a box. Ellen was right. It's bigger than I thought. She replied almost instantly, "Then you have to come back. You can't fight ghosts from across an ocean." I stared at her words for a long time. She was right. I'd come to Paris to breathe, but maybe I was supposed to return to finish what Ellen started. Back in my hotel room, I opened the balcony doors. The air smelled of wet iron and roasted coffee from the street below. I called Victor. He answered on the second ring, tone clipped but concerned. "Rowena, I was just about to reach out. I went through old statements. You weren't imagining those transfers. The routing path loops through a dormant account under your name, but the handwriting isn't yours." My heart stuttered. "So, forged?" "I'd stake my license on it." He hesitated. "There's more. Ellen tried to have it investigated once. I found her name in an archived complaint, withdrawn suddenly." "Withdrawn?" "Her mother signed off on the withdrawal, claiming Ellen was unstable." The room tilted. "Joyce?" I whispered. "Rowena," he said gently. "When you come back, bring whatever you found. We'll reopen it." I looked out over the rooftops of Paris, gray and endless, and felt something shift. For years, I'd believed my parents' cruelty came from favoritism, from pride. Now I saw it had been strategy. They hadn't wanted gratitude. They'd wanted silence. That evening, I met Pierre one last time at the studio. He noticed the heaviness in my brushstrokes before I said a word. "You're painting storms now," he murmured. "They started years ago," I said. "I'm just noticing the weather." He wiped his hands on a rag and studied me. "Sometimes freedom is not staying away. It's going back stronger." "I don't know if I can forgive them," I admitted. "Forgiveness is not a border," he said. "It's a map. You decide when to stop following it." I left him with the painting unfinished, gray bleeding into gold, and walked the streets until the lights blurred. At midnight, I stood by the Seine again, Ellen's letter in one hand, the brass key in the other. The water below caught the reflection of the bridges, shimmering like broken glass. I whispered into the wind, "I hear you now, Ellen." Then I booked my flight home. As I turned back toward the hotel, my phone buzzed. A new message from Victor. "Something else, Ro. Your signature appears on a loan document I'm certain you never signed. Gregory's name is on it too. We'll talk when you land." I looked down at the key one last time. It was warm, pulsing faintly against my palm, as if it had done its job and was ready to rest. Billings greeted me, with an emptiness that felt almost theatrical. Pale skies, skeletal trees, streets that seemed to remember what had been said in them. The snow had melted into dirty gray veins along the curbs. As I drove from the airport, the old neighborhood rose up like a ghost rehearsing its lines. My house, their house, for a while, sat at the end of the block, blinds drawn tight as if the windows were afraid to look out. I parked, sat in silence for a full minute, then stepped into the cold. The front steps creaked beneath my boots, familiar and accusing. Victor met me there, coat collar turned up, a folder tucked under his arm. "Welcome back," he said, his tone careful. "You're ready?" "I've been ready for 10 years, I replied. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and old candle wax. My parents had finally moved out, leaving the place stripped but not clean, like guilt that had been tidied but never confessed. Victor laid out the papers on the counter. "These are copies of the documents Ellen left. And this," he slid forward a new page, "is the loan file we discussed." The document was from 5 years ago. My name and social security number scrawled across the signature line. It wasn't my handwriting, but it was close, practice close. Beneath it, Gregory's signature gleamed in blue ink. The loan had funded a 6-figure injection into G-Vale Enterprises, the business he'd always bragged about at dinners. My jaw tightened. He forged me. Looks that way. And your parents co-signed on a separate line of credit using your equity in this house. I let out a breath that didn't sound like mine. So that's why they wanted me to keep paying. To keep the lie afloat. Victor nodded. Ellen uncovered enough to build a case before he stopped himself, voice gentling, before she passed. A silence spread between us, soft and dangerous. I folded the paper, not to protect it, but to stop myself from tearing it apart. "I'll handle this," I said finally. "Legally or personally?" "Both." That night, I found my parents' new address, a low-rent apartment near the outskirts of town. The building's hallway smelled of reheated dinners and worn-out apologies. I knocked. Joyce opened the door first. Her face, once proud and lacquered, now looked smaller, like time had erased the pretenses before it erased the guilt. Behind her, Walter sat in an armchair, a blanket across his knees, pretending to be ill. "Rowena," she said, voice a mixture of surprise and dread. "You came back." "Did you think I wouldn't?" Her eyes flicked toward the envelope in my hand, the one holding Ellen's notarized letter and the bank proofs. "We didn't mean—" "Don't," I interrupted. "I've spent my life giving you the benefit of the doubt. You don't get that anymore." Walter spoke, throat gravelly. "We were trying to help your brother. You have no idea the pressure we were under." "You forged me," I said flatly. "You let him steal from me and called it family." Walter's jaw worked. "Greg said he'd pay it back. It was supposed to be temporary." "And when Ellen found out?" I asked quietly. "You silenced her. You made her retract her complaint." Joyce's hand flew to her mouth. "She was confused. She was—" "Dying," I finished. "And still more honest than the three of you combined." Her eyes filled. We thought you could afford it." That sentence snapped something in me. "I could afford it," I said, voice low. "Because I was working 80-hour weeks, because I had no vacations, because I built a life around keeping you comfortable. You didn't take my money. You took my life." Joyce started to sob. Walter's face went pale, his eyes watery, but not from remorse, from the shock of losing control. "Where's Gregory?" I asked. Walter gestured weakly. "His office, downtown. But don't—" I was already turning toward the door. Gregory's office sat above an auto shop, a glass front with fading gold letters, G. Vale Enterprises. Inside, the air smelled like coffee and failure. Gregory looked up from behind a cluttered desk when I walked in. "Rowena," he said, a nervous laugh breaking the name. "Wow, Paris suits you." "You forged my signature," I said. No greeting, no preamble. He froze. "I don't—" I tossed the document onto his desk. "Try another lie. You've had practice." His face drained of color. "I was desperate. The business was tanking. Mom and Dad helped you commit fraud. They said you'd never find out." The words burst from him before he could catch them. "You always bailed everyone out. You'd have said yes anyway." I took a step closer, lowering my voice. "You built your success on stolen breath, Greg. Ellen knew. She left proof." He blinked, swallowing hard. "Ellen? She left a statement, a confession. Copies of every transfer." I leaned in. "You're going to make this right." He tried for indignation, but it cracked in his throat. "What are you going to do? Turn us in? Your own family?" "If the choice is between protecting criminals or honoring my sister," I said, "I know exactly what I'll do." He laughed once, a sharp, scared sound. "If I go down, I'm not going alone. Dad signed every document. He knew." The room went quiet. Behind us, the office door creaked open. Walter stood there, face ashen, a trembling hand gripping the frame. "I did," he said hoarsely. Gregory spun toward him. "Dad!" Walter's eyes filled, years of pretense collapsing in one exhale. "I told him to use your name," he said to me. "You were the only one with good credit left. It was my idea." My body went still. Even Gregory looked stunned. "Why?" I whispered. Walter's voice cracked. "Because I thought you owed us for everything we sacrificed raising you. Because Greg was our chance to fix what we couldn't." He looked down. "And because I knew you wouldn't fight me." He wasn't wrong. For most of my life, I wouldn't have. But now, I was done being the quiet account they drew from. I straightened. "You were right about one thing," I said softly. "I won't fight you. I'll bury you, in paper, in proof, in every document you signed." Walter flinched. Gregory turned away, hands pressed to his face. "You'll ruin us," my father said. "No," I said. "You did that yourselves. I'm just done cleaning up after it." The three of us stood there, the air thick with years of rot finally unsealed. The truth hung between us like smoke that couldn't find a window. I gathered the papers, slid them back into my folder, and looked at Walter, at both of them. "Victor will contact you. You'll sign a restitution agreement. Every cent you took gets repaid, legally bound, monitored. You'll also record a confession for the record. If either of you refuses, I press charges." Gregory looked up, voice cracking. "And Mom?" She's already paid, I said. You'll understand soon. Walter took a slow breath, realization dawning that for once I wasn't bluffing. When I turned to leave, Gregory whispered something I almost didn't catch. Ellen tried to protect you. I told Dad she'd ruin us. I'm sorry. I stopped at the door, the winter light spilling across the floor. You can't apologize for a decade in one sentence, I said, but it's a start. Outside, the cold hit my face like absolution. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I owed anyone an explanation. The next morning, my house felt like a courtroom, every creak a verdict, every draft a cross-examination. I brewed coffee black and bitter, poured it into my chipped Paris mug, and waited for the sound of footsteps on the porch. At 9 sharp, Victor arrived, legal pad in hand. They've agreed to meet, he said, but expect tension. Walter's defensive, Gregory's panicked. Joyce. He hesitated. Joyce is silent. Silence is new for her, I muttered. We set up at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd once laid out their overdue bills in neat stacks, begging them to see reason. Now, legal documents replaced the bills. Restitution agreements, confession drafts, bank authorizations. Proof of a decade's theft laid out like anatomy after dissection. At 9:30, a knock. When I opened the door, my family stood in a crooked line, like guilt arranged itself by height. Joyce's eyes were red, Walter's shoulders slumped, Gregory's hands shook despite his rehearsed calm. Victor nodded politely. Let's get started. I gestured toward the table. Sit. They did. The air between us was too heavy for anyone to pretend it was love. Victor began, voice steady. We've agreed to an arrangement that prevents formal charges, provided the terms are met. Gregory will sign a confession of forgery and fraudulent use of Ms. Vale's credit. Restitution will be made through structured repayments over 7 years. Should he default, the signed confession will be submitted to the state attorney. Gregory's pen hovered over the line. His face was pale, jaw tight. 7 years? That'll ruin me. I leaned forward. That's what you already did to me, Greg. The difference is, you'll still have time left when it's over. He didn't look up, he signed. Victor turned the page. Mr. and Mrs. Vale will sign a release acknowledging that they knowingly benefited from the misappropriated funds and agree to waive any future claim to this property. Joyce's lip trembled. Rowena, please, we can't afford him. I know, I said softly. You'll manage, the way I did. Walter's hand shook as he took the pen. I was trying to keep us together, he whispered. No, I said, you were trying to keep control. He pressed the pen down anyway, ink blotting the line. Joyce followed, her hand unsteady, her perfume faintly floral, a scent that once meant comfort, now memory. When it was done, Victor gathered the documents, tapped them into a clean stack, and said, We'll file copies today. He looked at me, waiting for a cue. Give us a moment, I said. He nodded, stepped out onto the porch, and closed the door behind him. For the first time, it was just the 3 of us again. Walter looked smaller now, the weight of his decisions finally visible on his frame. You really mean to cut us off, he said, not as accusation, but disbelief. I met his gaze. Boundaries aren't punishment, Dad. They're survival. You taught me that. Just in reverse. Joyce swallowed, tears trembling. We didn't mean for it to go so far. You always said that, I said quietly. Every time it did. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Silence. For Joyce, that was almost repentance. Gregory spoke next, voice thin. You hate me. I shook my head. No, hate would mean I still carry you. I'm setting you down. He nodded once, shame flickering in his eyes. Walter looked at the papers one more time. You'll regret this, he said. I stood calm. Maybe, but at least it'll be my regret, not one you wrote for me. They left soon after. No hugs, no final words. Just the sound of the door clicking shut, the echo of generations breaking in quiet dignity. When the car pulled away, I didn't cry. I expected to, but what came instead was stillness. I turned to Victor. Sell the house, I said. All of it. He raised an eyebrow. You're sure? Absolutely. I want a smaller place. Something mine, not inherited by guilt. He smiled faintly. I'll list it next week. That night, I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes, the last remnants of a life I'd spent building for others. Ellen's journal lay open beside me. I reread her words one last time. Live for you doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you stop bleeding for love. I whispered, I understand now. I packed the journal into my suitcase next to the brass key. The next morning, I met with a realtor, signed the sale agreement, and handed over the house keys. As the papers clicked shut in the folder, I felt something inside me unfasten. Before leaving, I walked through the empty rooms: kitchen, living room, the small window Ellen used to sit by. Light poured through the blinds in soft lines, touching everything like forgiveness that didn't need permission. On the mantel, I left one thing behind: Ellen's old wooden box, polished and closed. Inside, I placed a note: "For whoever lives here next, may you only open doors meant for you." 3 months later, I was back in Paris. I rented a small apartment above a bakery. The mornings smelled like bread and rain. I painted again, not to forget, but to remember in color instead of ache. One evening, Pierre stopped by the studio. "You look lighter," he said. "I sold my house," I replied. He smiled. "You sold your past." I nodded, and bought peace. We stood by the window, watching the city breathe. Below, someone played a violin, the sound rising like smoke. I took the brass key from my pocket, held it to the fading light, and whispered, "You did your job." Then I hung it on a string above my desk, not as a reminder of what was stolen, but of what I reclaimed. Sometimes freedom doesn't roar, it exhales. For years, I thought family meant giving until it hurt. Now I know. The real test of love is knowing when to stop bleeding for it. And I finally have.